of a football club.
The mind of Alistair Clarkson across a week last Thursday night, if you were watching 360 Extra, absolutely convinced he was coming back, and then he's just tapping the brakes in Shepparton yesterday. So I was thinking, to coach or not to coach, who would be the right person? I'm long overdue for this chat. David Parkin, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Jared. Pleased to be back.
I was thinking if there's anybody who could probably understand the tensions at play in Alistair Clarkson's mind, it would be you, David. Do you have an affinity for the wrestle that he's going through?
There is no doubt that Alistair will coach again. If I was a betting man, even on very small odds, I think I'd go for that. And I think for the game's sake, and this is a very selfish view, I suppose, of a game which I love, but if there was ever a person who could bring a community together, and it's the most, separated community I can think of in Australia, who has already done the background work in what needs to be done. Alistair should be tempted, encouraged, seduced to coach the first team in Tasmania. I just think he'd be the perfect person. I'm hoping in my lifetime, I'm not much left, but I'm hoping we'll have a team in Northern Territory and in Tasmania to give us the 20 teams and the cover of the country. And there is no doubt in my mind, Alistair the most successful coach probably in the history of the game, but certainly in the modern game. And to have him lead that, Jared, would be just a fantastic thing to happen for footy. I think for probably Alistair too, it might take some time and energy to get the team to where he can win what he wants to win, but I would have thought to lift his mark on the game, historically it would be fantastic to bring Tasmania together, which is not easy, but I reckon football would be the one element that has the capacity to bring the Tasmanian people north, south and north west together, and it would be terrific to have the continent covered, except for Northern Territory, which I think is down the road some way.
Yeah, that's the visionary part of you, David's always been there. So just tell me this: if let's say Tassie is 2028, he'll know that in August when the vote happens. There'll be a date attached to it. It could be 2027. It could be 2028. Should he take a job in the interim?
Yeah, look, I think that's probably true. I was hoping there might be some effort to do it quicker.
Yep.
But as you say, I think that's almost decided. Historically, that's going to be a very difficult thing to bring about. And to be out of it that long, I couldn't imagine having been down that road. I had a couple of years out at one stage where I worked in footy around the edge of it and went back in and enjoyed it afterwards. But I think that's probably, you're right, Jared, that's probably too long a separation. And knowing Alistair, and he's such a competitive little bloke, that he'll want to be back in the thrust of the coaching thing. So, I mean, my idea was for football and using the right person in the right place, but Tasmania would have to hurry up and increase. I don't think it's going to happen any faster than you suggested.
The gap year, David. So when you had a year where you weren't coaching, then I presume you sort of took your time to figure out whether you wanted to or not. So I think you would know exactly what he's going through. The coach in you that can't be quietened and maybe that competitive streak that you just can't shake.
Oh, look, Alistair is that sort of person. I taught Alistair, who was a student of mine and his wife at Deakin University, and I've known him for a long, long time. And that's his combative nature. That's always been his personality. And I think the game is worse off by not having him in the cut and the thrust. And I would have thought for Alistair too. I mean, I had 2 years out. I worked with the umpires for those 2 years. It was one of the better educations I actually had. To understand the game from a different point of view and the difficulties they have and are still having in the game. It was good for my education. I really believe that was probably the finish for me. My coaching, I wouldn't be offered a job again. It's funny that John Elliott, who sacked me previously a decade before, was the one that came tapping on the door and said, I think it's the right time to bring you back. And I had probably my most enjoyable period was during the 90s. That 10 years for me was a terrific time. But off the back of an education, Jared, that I didn't choose, that somebody chose me to do and work with the umpires, was probably very, very helpful in giving me an empathy and understanding and get my head into my things that I can control and forget about the umpires when I was terrible when I was coaching initially. So, yeah, look, it's interesting time. The game has reached an interesting point.
How does so let's park Tassie as the long term. Say it is next year. How does he choose a job, and notwithstanding that you have to be offered a job, David, as you've just described?
Yeah, look, I think that's very, very difficult. I'm not sure whether he will and who the alternatives are. There's some obvious ones around, like Western Sydney at the moment. They've got to make a decision. That's one hell, and you're suggesting it is one hell of a decision for a person, his family, and the future to jump into something like that. I admire him enormously for his courage and decision making over a long period of time. As I suggest, probably the most successful. Oh, he's the most successful coach. The Geelong coach has done pretty well too on a win-loss ratio, except he just hasn't collected the premierships along the way. But Alistair would be the highest, reward for a club to get and pursue and to get him in. And it's going to be it is a fascinating story, really, what lies ahead for Alistair Clarkson.
And the number of clubs who I pondered a couple of weeks ago, David, the idea of a president just having to look in the mirror and this one unique moment in time go, are we better off with our guy, who we really like, or are we better off with Clarkson?
Jared, I hate getting it because I've been on the end of the suppositions, etc. I've been a part of, and I laugh now because I was a three-man panel who sacked Michael Voss in Brisbane. And I will never, ever forget that. One of the worst moments in my life when he made a fantastic presentation. Six of the 12 board members were on the other side of the table. I was sitting with the three of us who had done the review of all the players and the coaching staff and administrative staff. And he asked for any questions, and nobody asked a question. I couldn't believe it. Nobody from the board. I said, well, Michael, how would you feel if half of those people on the other side of the table there wanted you and the other half didn't? Well, I still to this day I don't know why I asked the question. He looked at me like I'd shot him, and he packed up his stuff and walked out the door.
Right.
And we're all sitting there looking at each other. I thought, what have I done? Anyway, he came back in far enough for me to see him. He said, just make sure if they aren't united totally, I don't get the job. So that was Michael's, departure from Brisbane. I've carried that. You wouldn't believe, but for the last 5 or 6 years, he's been my son Anthony's boss in Port Adelaide.
Yep.
And they've had a wonderful relationship, which is good despite what I did to him. And then, as the somersault happens, who sits on the board or sits on the selection panel at the Carlton Football Club for the new coach, and who gets the job at Michael Voss? So it's been a fascinating story. And there's no doubt that they picked up a magnificent leader. And the leadership part of coaching, I think, is absolutely crucial. As we've seen with some people around it, that's where you are, major leadership. The technical coaching staff can be done by, 4 or 5 people in support of you if you're a good leader, but it doesn't work the other way around. You need the leadership side more than anything else, I think, in that role today because of who you are connected to. This is not just playing group, but staff, coaching staff that support you, the administrative staff of the club, and of course the supporters as a whole. It's one hell of a job, and to think that you can get somebody who does all of those things, including coaching the team specifically, is almost beyond one person's ability, in my humble opinion. I think what the decision that Carlton have made has been fantastic, and they've got a great leader of the organisation.
So it's gladdened your heart to watch them through the first 9-week start 7-2, which is a bit of a throwback to the Parkin days.
Oh, thank you, sure. No, because I'm a nervous Nelly watching when I don't really know what's going on and what capacities of people are. But I meet them. I'm walking down the street yesterday, and I bumped into 2 people I didn't know, but they were obviously lunatic Carlton supporters, and to see them, instead of dragging their feet in the gutter and their heads down, etc., to see them bouncing around and wanting to have a positive conversation, Jared, about the Carlton Football Club is just a fabulous term. It's great for them and it's good for footy. I think of North at the moment who are, really struggling. I want them. I love the coach. I think he's doing a terrific job. But I want them up and going for the so many people whose lives have changed. I don't know whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's terrible in society that maybe football holds such a powerful position. But it does, and we should acknowledge that. And to have a competition which gives, joy to everybody is something we should be aiming for all the time. That's why the team in Tasmania and the team in my humble opinion, in Northern Territory, in time, is essential for the community, for our population.
Yeah. Hey, can I just ask you, so the Michael Voss scenario, now you play a role in him coming to Carlton. Did you stay in touch across those years in the interim? And
Never.
Right.
Never. No, never. I was too embarrassed. I never had a single conversation with him. I knew a lot about him because of my relationship with Ken Hinkley and with Anthony, my son, who worked there, but I did not, and I was embarrassed about about what had happened and the way it had happened, and to be reunited again. He did ring me prior to the what was called the interview, I suppose, and it was lovely to have a positive conversation with him, having been on the end of that one. It was a long while ago, probably 10 years ago, was it? Maybe even longer. The one in Brisbane. So, but footy's good like that, and that's the greatness of that man, that he was able to do his role at Port Adelaide, a different role in a different way, brought the place together. I'm told he was the leader of the club and did a terrific job in getting them, and they're sad in a real sense that he's no longer in that role there. But I am delighted, and from the people, I'm quite removed these days, Gerard, really, but from the people I know at the Carlton Football Club in the variety of roles, whether it's an administrative role or it's a coaching role, I'm delighted to hear their response to this position being given to Michael Voss.
What's your early impressions of Sam Mitchell at Hawthorn, David, who you've been very close to over a long period of time?
Not as close these days, I think, but it's one heck of a job that he's got himself into, I think. But there's some obvious talent there. You'd never underestimate Sam Mitchell, as we know. He's a highly intelligent. To have got out of himself what he did with a body, etc., a bit like Greg Williams, my two favourite players in a real sense, because you looked at them and said, well, this game is not built for you. No chance that you'll become great players in a competition of this level, and both went on to actually dominate the competition in a real sense with their desire. And he'll do the same, Gerard. That's his personality. Tremendously well prepared. When I know that he's been ringing round past players to see who they would want to wear their Guernsey number. Now, he rang me about 27 and I said, get on with the job. You've got more important things to do than make these conversations. And he got really angry with me. And I know he's rung Don Scott and a few others, etc. So that's the sort of person he is. Nobody would work harder in their preparation for. Never underestimate Sam Mitchell. And I think they're in good hands and will be very competitive in a couple of years. I think they've got some good talent coming through, and they'll be okay. For Hawthorn supporters, they should be looking forward to the future with a great deal of confidence.
Just remind me, you grew up a Melbourne supporter, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I started 1949. I've been a member since 1949, so I can grab them. Don't worry, they're my club. Don't worry about that.
Are they?
Now they're
do they have the makings of being a super team?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's good, they have enough depth that they've missed particular players in specific roles, Gerard, that have been replaced by somebody with real ability and an absolute want to be there and playing with the gusto they have. Oh, look, it'll take a massive number of injuries and some other team to come out of wherever I can't see to beat them. They're a joy to watch because they're. Doesn't matter how little we score, we'll score more. They're on that sort of bandwagon, high scoring, quick movement of the ball. I love watching them play, and I think we might be able to pick a combined side that would run them to the post, but I'm not even sure that would win either.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how good I think they are. Yeah, and joy to watch too, and good for I know so many Melbourne people have been waiting for something like this, and they're deservedly getting their loyalty, rewarded.
Yeah, yeah. So is it the way that they play? Is it the individual players? I'm so curious as to where your eye would be drawn with them.
No, that's a really good assessment. I heard you talking about the other night on Fox, and it's Jared. It's obviously a combo. No, look, individually they have some of the most talented, athletically, the quickest running players that I've ever seen, which are a joy to watch as individual. But it's done in a collective way. The understanding at the moment between them is second to none. I can't remember, even great teams that I coached, I haven't seen this knowledge and understanding in anticipation of what will happen 5 or 6 seconds ahead. That is incredible. Understanding of each other and a coordination of effort that you might remember, but I can't remember a team that has produced at that level as often as they have over the last couple of years. So that confidence, unless something diabolical happens, which I couldn't predict, Melbourne are going to be the lead in the field for not just this year and next year, but for 3 or 4 years.
One other coaching prospect, David, that's been spoken about for the moment is whether James Hird could find his way back to a coaching job after the long gap between how things ended at Essendon and all that he went through there. Could you imagine that, or is there just too much?
That's a really good question, Jared. I would love it for him because I know his genuine love for the game and understanding of the game. I would hope not. I would hope that he would be used in the manner which he has, with the experience he has, to assist somebody else in that role. That would be my view, but it's from a long, long way away. I admire him enormously as a person, and I'm not sure that he should be putting himself back into that kind of position again, but who's to know?
Yeah, and I was thinking you'd be enjoying Brett Ratton's rise with the Saints too. I was thinking there's the connections you have with so many of the key people in the industry, which is why you're the marvel that you are. Rats is having a real run at it.
Look, and it's terrific to see when you think of his life and what that family has been subjected to. He and his footy, I thought it was a disaster when he was removed from his role at the Carlton Football Club. I don't think anybody could have done any better at that particular time. So pleased, as you probably know, and I've said it so often publicly, the most thinking player, an understanding of the game that I have ever coached. And that includes some, even people like Sam Mitchell and Cooper. Rats, to me, has a feel for the game. As he did as a beginning player, he would come and tap on my door and say, have you thought about? And I would, if I hadn't thought about it, I'd start to think about it, because he just had this feel for the game and what was required by individuals and the collection at that time. That's unique. I've met too many, Jared, along the way that have that as a basic part of their makeup.
Yep.
So I hope for both Rats and St Kilda, and I'm not sure how good they are. I look across the field and they're reasonably talented, but certainly I don't think have enough to take it away from a team like Melbourne. But it's great to see St Kilda on the rise again, and I'm absolutely delighted the leader of that is Brett Ratton.
Yeah. I could talk to you all day, Parko. It's great to catch up. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to ring you again, even if you don't want to. Fantastic. Thank you, David. It's great to get your insights.
No, look, I talk to you every day. It's either on Fox or on. No, I don't talk. You talk to me every day, and that's enough, Jared. So all the best with your work. Keep the good work up.
Good on you.